be here with Nadine today with all of you. Nadine is a dear friend. I've known her for so long and loved being with her and learning more about her at Children's Home Society. We were on, I guess the first way that I met her was we were both on the board of Children's Home Society, and we came to know each other that way. But then we fired her because she was going to be looking at the possibility of being the CEO and president of Children's Home Society, and that's much better than having her on the board. Nadine went to the University of Richmond and T.C. Williams Law School, and she practiced with her father, Senator Henry Marsh, for 9 years before we were lucky enough to get her at Children's Home Society. We both have a very deep connection there. Nadine adopted her children from Children's Home Society, and I was adopted through Children's Home Society, so it's been around for a long time. So it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Nadine Marsh-Carter.
Very much for that introduction, Mickey. You know, when I come here, it feels like coming home in a lot of ways. There are familiar faces here. Mickey was an amazing board chair and true leader and guider for me as I undertook the wonderful opportunity of leading the agency. I also see that we have Jill Cabot, who was on our junior board, and she was an amazing resource. We have Jane Peevers, who was on our board, and then we also have one of our social workers, Barbara Garrison, who candidly worked with one of my birth parents and helped create my family. That's the beauty of adoption, and that's one of the things I'll certainly talk about today, the lifelong changes and networks, people silently touched by the power of family, and that's going to be one of my themes today. So thank you for coming. And I'm going to unbutton my jacket because this is generating a lot of heat. Do you want me to? Oh, no, that's okay. But I didn't want you to wonder why I was disrobing. I've learned some lessons in speaking that I was sharing with Mickey. The last time I spoke, I had about 10 pages of notes. And about page 2, I got excited, hit the podium, and all of my pages. So today I have a stapler. And I'm just really looking forward to sharing. You know, it's a real opportunity to share with the group, first of all, that wants to learn. That often you have an audience that's captive like you, but maybe they're not as interested in the topic. And so I'm thrilled to have this group. It's also especially powerful to me to speak to a group of people of faith. You know, the work of Children's Home Society as an adoption agency truly is to care for the least of these. And the Bible calls us to do that. So it's always an honor to me to be in the presence of folks who really believe in caring for and supporting those who might not otherwise have a voice. So today I want us to take on this major topic. And I had to read it because when they asked me to speak so long ago, I thought, oh sure, foster care and adoption in today's world. Why is Virginia ranked 49th of the 50 states? That's a big topic. That's something we could talk about for hours, and I'm going today to provide some basic information and then encourage you to ask questions so that I can help you understand better about what you want to learn about the issue. I'm going to start with a confession. I can't give you a simple answer to why Virginia is 49th of the 50 states. But what I can do is relay the myriad of factors that lead to Virginia struggling in its response to children in the foster care system, and talk about how agencies like Children's Home Society, as well as concerned citizens like you, can help move the needle forward and really move us from being at the bottom to the top. Virginia's great at a lot of things. When you think about it, we're often proud of our ranking, whether it's in terms of economic development, whether it's in terms of our educational system. I even read a study in preparation for this that says we have one of the best correctional systems in the country. Virginia, U.S. News & World Report recently ranked Virginia in the top 10 states in the country for places to live. So we're in the top 10 of places where people would want to come and raise their families. But unfortunately, we're not good. We don't rank well at many of the indicators in terms of how we treat our most vulnerable in society, and that's children. In fact, when you look at our poverty rate for children, the mortality rate for children, those who are disadvantaged really fall really low, and that's a shame. And that's one factor in the reality why Virginia ranks, and again I'll say it, 49th of the 50 states in terms of the number of children who are placed in the foster care system and never ever have what we call a forever family. They simply drift through the system until they're on their own. Now I'll say first and foremost that foster care is intended to be a short-term solution. It's a way to remove children from a dangerous or precarious family circumstance temporarily until either the family can be supported and get back to where it needs to be, or another permanent solution should be found. So foster care isn't the end goal. But when you consider that we rank worse at our handling of children in the foster care system, that means we're simply letting down the most vulnerable of children. Children who have already experienced significant abuse and neglect, so severe that they had to be removed from their parents. Children who experience families so unstable that they could never return, and so their parents' rights have been terminated. Children who are then placed in foster care and simply stay, often for years. The typical child in our foster care system moves between 5 different families before they age out, 5 different schools, 5 different settings, already having experienced a significant history of trauma. And then often they age out, and that's what we mean by saying 49 to the 50 states. They never find a family. And so they simply turn 18 and either choose to leave or are kicked out of the system and never go back. Ill-equipped to make decisions, to provide for themselves. Think how many of us are ready at age 18 to simply start making good choices, put themselves through school, find good jobs, and do all the things that are required to be a productive member of society. So I want to pause at this point and show a video so you can hear firsthand from some of the children that we have been working with in terms of how they got into the system and how the system impacted them. And it's not an easy video, but these are real facts and real stories. And the technology is the scariest part of this whole thing. So if we can get this to work, I am sorry now.
You turn the lights on.
For almost 120 years, Children's Home Society of Virginia has been inspired.
I'm not sure why this is not coming. I can see it. Anyone have technical capacity?
For almost 120 years, Children's Home.
So I can see it up here, but it's not letting me.
Are you using a Mac?
No, I'm using a PC.
No guarantee.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were playing it, that's why we set it up there.
Do you know what a waiting child is? It's a child in foster care who's with
Is the technology rated so it doesn't work?
We've helped place over 14,500 children in safe, loving, permanent homes.
Do you know what a wait?
For almost 120 years, Children's Home Society of Virginia has been inspired by the power of family. From our family.
Do you know what a waiting child is? It's a child in foster care who's waiting to be adopted. A child who's waiting for a mom or dad who will help them do their homework, who will hold their hand when they cry, and will love them and care for them for life. A waiting child.
It's not duplicate the screen up to there, so she's running the video, but.
We needed the ministerial impact too. Divine intervention in order to make it, thank you. Okay, so these are stories of children who we serve and actual highlights of just some of the children in Richmond's foster care system. Thank you.
Do you know what a waiting child is? It's a child in foster care who's waiting to be adopted. A child who's waiting for a mom or dad who will help them do their homework, who will hold their hand when they cry, and will love them and care for them for life. A waiting child is waiting for a new future. Unfortunately, Virginia children wait the longest. Compared to the rest of the United States, Virginia ranks nearly last place in the time it takes to be adopted. And with each and every birthday, the hope of being adopted grows dimmer. Because Virginia ranks worse in the country for children who age out of the foster care system. Hello, my name is Alina. I was put into foster care at 9 years old due to neglect and abuse. The feeling of not being wanted really caused me to rebel. I would do things I'm not supposed to. I would stay out till 2 a.m. in the morning hiding from police. I just want you to picture that though, because that is a 6, 7-year-old girl who is out at 2 a.m. in a trailer park hiding from cops so she wouldn't have to be returned home. Because the fear of dealing with cops overrode any day of living in my house. The abuse from my father still affects me today. You wake up from nightmares from having that feeling. You wake up knowing that he's somewhere out there and he might find you, he may not, but you never know. You're constantly living in fear. So a childhood wasn't ever a possibility for me. Like me, all children in foster care have a story to tell. Their stories are difficult to hear because they're stories of abuse, neglect, and abandonment. My past is just a part of my story. I was adopted, and that changed my journey. But so many children are still waiting. Listen to their stories.
My name is Caden. I'm 13. I love roller skating and skateboarding. I have nightmares when the things my parents did to me come back. I was afraid all the time. I couldn't concentrate on school. They beat me, they burned me, they locked me in my closet, and they punished me by starving me. I was always hungry, so hungry. Sometimes I search in the trash just to get something to eat. I want a family who will love me for who I am. I want parents who will be proud of me. I want a family. I deserve a future.
My name is Kevon Shea. I'm 15. If you're looking for me, you'll probably find me outside somewhere. I love basketball. I really love it. I'd rather play basketball than almost anything else. When I'm playing, I don't think about anything, just the game, the ball, and making a shot. When I'm playing, I don't think about my dad and how he was so angry all the time. He put me in the bathtub and pushed my head under it. I couldn't scream, I couldn't breathe, but that was gonna kill me. Back then, I worried about dying. Now, I worry what would happen to me if I'm not adopted. I want a family. I deserve a better future.
My name is Madeline. Most people call me Maddie. I'm always drawing, and usually I draw animals. I used to have a cat. I like cats. I don't really like dogs. If you were me, you wouldn't like dogs very much either. It's hard for me to talk about, but my parents used to lock me in a dog crate for days, without food or water. I was so hungry. I was so scared. I know now that's no way to treat a child. No one deserves that. I want a family. I deserve a future.
The older the kids get, the more difficult it is to help them find a home. What's it like to age out of the system? To be 18 years old and alone? Mark knows. Listen to his story.
It's been a year since I've turned 18 and left social services, and it's been one of the longest years of my life. And I don't mean for the better. It's mainly for the worse. It's been a lot of ups and downs. It's job to job, floor to floor. On the streets, roaming around. When you gonna eat? Where I'm gonna stay at the night? I'm gonna get money to get what I need. It's not the life to live. It's real hard out here. And I wouldn't. It's not the life to live for me or anybody else that's my age. Or in the same situation as me. So, I give plasma, unfortunately. Just to make enough money, to give me something to eat, for that day or two, it's hard because when you think about it, like when I go twice a week, I have to throw on extra garments of clothes, just to weigh enough, to get that specific amount of money, and it makes me feel like real, frustrated and sad because I'm just sitting there, knowing that I'm giving stuff out of my body just for a certain amount of money, and it's not the life for me.
Would you make it on your own at 18? Or would you struggle, like Mark? The truth is, being in foster care is already a struggle. Every child struggles to come to terms with their past, the loss of their family, no matter how bad it was. In foster care, fear and uncertainty take over. Virginia's children need the support of a loving family to heal and grow. They want the security of a family that will be theirs for life. They deserve a love only a family can provide. We want a family.
We want a family. We deserve a future. We deserve better.
We deserve better.
So as I mentioned, the stories are hard to hear. I will say as a postscript that every one of the children in that video has been placed with a safe, loving family and is now thriving, except for the young man who had turned 18 and aged out, and he's currently incarcerated.
Oh, no.
And what that reflects are the odds that affect children who don't get adopted, and that's why the challenge of kids aging out is so significant. The statistics were in the video. For every child who never is adopted, within 2 years of aging out of the foster care system, 25% will be incarcerated. 20% will be homeless. And in fact, that's the fastest growing population of homelessness in our country, are kids who age out of the foster care system. Fewer than 20% ever graduate from high school, and 70%, actually 71% of the young ladies will have a baby within 2 years. These are cycles of poverty that we can break when we give children the power of family. And the foster care system is the first step in making that happen when it's working effectively. It's discouraging to see these videos, and yet there's some encouraging news. When we did this a couple of years ago, Virginia was 50th, now we're 49th. But what has happened recently is that fostering futures, legislation has been passed in Virginia that allows youth who age out at 18 to come back into the system if they're willing to go before a court and say, hey, I really still need help. And what that does is it does capture many of the young people who otherwise would be on the streets. Unfortunately, not all, because many of these young people have been in and out of the social services system for so long, and they're so frustrated with the system, and they feel like they're invincible at 18 or 19, that they decide not to opt back into the system, and that has devastating consequences. This is a challenge that's not unique to Virginia. It's a nationwide problem. There are about 400,000 children in the nation's foster care system right now, and of those, 100,000 are eligible and waiting to be adopted. In Virginia, I checked the stats last night, there are about 5,300 children in the foster care system, and of those, anywhere between 750 to 1,000 are waiting to be adopted. This is a costly challenge. Our foster care system costs Virginia about $500 million every year. That includes both state, national, and local funding. And when a youth is not adopted out of the system, it costs the Commonwealth about $300,000 per youth. When you consider the cost of homelessness, incarceration, unwanted pregnancy, there's a ripple effect. So not only do we have a moral obligation to really make sure that we have better outcomes in foster care, permanency outcomes, but there's a cost reality. If you don't want to have any other moral obligation to the kids, it costs our community if we don't fix this problem. How do we do it? We provide children permanence, and that's what Children's Home Society has been doing since 1998, when we first partnered with a local social services agency in Chesterfield to say, hey, we see these kids in foster care in Chesterfield waiting for a family. We'll come in and we'll become their recruiters, often like a sports recruiter. We will meet with the child, we'll come to understand their needs, and we'll go out in the community and find a family for these kids. The reality is there aren't a lot of folks who say, hey, I'd love to adopt a 15-year-old girl who's been sexually abused and cuts herself, right? But when you present all of the potential that she has, that she loves to read, that she dreams of going to the prom, and you provide the families the supports they need, adoption works. And children are resilient. When given the support of a family, we see time and time again that they rebound. There was one of our placements that when he was, they mentioned he was held his head underwater. Eventually he learned how to swim and become a championship swimmer. Children can bounce back when we give them the supports and the families the supports they need to help the families thrive. And so we are a permanency agency. We used to call ourselves an adoption agency. But adoption is just one tool to permanency. Permanency means children are anchored unconditionally to a family. It means they have a lifetime of support and confidence that comes with being a part of that family. It means that they have connections that honor their heritage and help them to grow. And permanency can come through adoption. It can come through finding kin, a relative who would be willing to take the child. And in some cases, when properly working with the family, the biological family is absolutely the best place for that child to be. You just have to equip those parents to break the cycles of abuse and neglect that have been taking place. So we work with a sense of urgency to create family. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I want to really get to the basic question, and that's why is Virginia 49? Where are we failing that our system is so behind in so many other areas when we do well in so many other things? I can tell you first and foremost what we have found in our work with social services. We started with Chesterfield and now have partners throughout the state where we go in, work with children and get them out of the foster care system. First of all, the social workers' caseloads are entirely too heavy, much heavier than they are in many other states. Their pay rates are low. It's tough work. And they're in a combative situation often with biological families. And so there's a tremendous turnover. Most social workers in the state stay less than 2 years. By the time they learn their job, they're looking for another. There also is a bureaucratic mindset often where they're dealing with just the immediate problem instead of looking long term. If you get a child out of a dangerous situation, it's time to deal with the next challenge. And so adoption sort of falls off the radar, even though that is really the best outcome. And finally, we have to recognize our system often looks to the hurdles instead of the ways to make families work. We have policies in the state that don't support adoption. We have policies, for example, that when the child turns 17, Social services says, well, it's not likely they're gonna get placed, so we're gonna not pay or reimburse anyone for finding a family for them, we're gonna move on to a younger child. And agencies like Children's Home Society say there's no way we're gonna stop. We have placed children a week short of their 18th birthday if you really do the due diligence and get creative in your family recruitment. We are also a state that have policies that don't support what's called kinship care. And the best way to describe that is if mom's an opioid addict and just can't raise her children, but her grandma steps in and says, I'll take my grandbabies, but I'm on a fixed income, and so I need a little financial help in order to raise my grandchildren. The state says, oh, we don't pay kin to raise their family. We'll pay a foster family that doesn't have any connection with the child, but why would we pay a relative to raise that child? And that's a flawed assumption. If we look beyond the fact that it's paying families, but it's keeping the child connected with their heritage and their culture, that's part of what best practices say makes for a better family. And so you've got administrative challenges, and then you have policy challenges. And so our response has been numerous. First, we work diligently, as I said, to get children adopted. We've expanded our staff and our collaborative partners so that we're out on the forefront, always looking to find a family for a child. We had a young man who, when he came into care, his family had engaged in satanic rituals. And as a result, he hurt small animals. That's really off-putting to families. He couldn't help it. He was getting mental health counseling, but it made finding an adoptive family really hard. And so our social worker came up with the great idea of going to taxidermy groups. Those are the folks that like stuffed animals and mount them. They found a family there that wasn't as off-put by the fact that he had a challenge with animals. He was getting the therapy he needed, but in the meantime, he found a family that was willing to work with him. And that's where we as a nonprofit have the nimbleness and the ability to get creative. Certainly the family has to be approved, the family has to be trained, they have to be appropriate. But we can step out of the box to find ways to find kids, families that might otherwise not have a family. All of our work is evidence-based, it's trauma-informed. Every child who comes into the foster care system has experienced a trauma. Every one, that's why they got there. And then often they're traumatized by the multiple moves and things that happen while they're in the foster care system. So all of our staff are trauma certified now and know how to approach not only working with the child, but with the family so that they can respond to the child's needs. We also work culturally with cultural sensitivity, and we provide a holistic, let's wrap all the services around the family that we can, because we don't want the children to be back in the system. We need our adoptions to work. So we're all about training, and staying on top of what are the best practices tell us to do. But you're not just here to learn about what Children's Home Society is doing. We really want to talk about how is the state responding to this challenge. Since 2007, we have been in the bottom 3 of the country at the rate at which children age out. So this is a challenge that we kind of had to dance around. I shared with Mickey. We get some state funding to do this work, so we didn't want to criticize the state too much because that's the source of part of our revenue, and yet we're constantly raising private funds to allow us to do even more. And so here, it's really, the timing of this is beautiful because just this past December, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review, you guys may have heard of JLARC, produced a study on Virginia's foster care system. It was a front page article in the Times-Dispatch. And this is huge because not only are private folks saying, hey, the system's broken and the data is telling us we're not doing it well, but now JLARC has said, hey, there are some real problems within the social services system, and here's where they are and how you can address it. I want to just talk a little bit about that JLARC study. And if anyone's interested, I can send you a link to the actual details because it's a long formal report with 35 recommendations. But here's what it says in a nutshell. And it's just great stuff because we are like, yeah, we've been seeing that for a while, but we're glad the state gets it now. First of all, I've noted that we are not, as a state, adhering to the requirements in place to keep children out of risk. Big problem there, folks. We're not doing what the state tells us it should be doing to protect its children, its most vulnerable children. And these are just a few of the highlights. It also says that we need to increase the number of family-based care. Often, there's so many children trying to get into the foster care system that a social worker is forced or it just puts them in a group home or in a residential treatment facility because the children are acting out. Well, they're acting out because of their trauma. And the best setting for a child is a family setting. And it's saying Virginia is not meeting the standards in terms of getting children with families. First foster families, but then ultimately permanent adoptive families. It says the state is not doing a good job of finding kin and keeping children with their kin. It's easier, again, to place a child in a foster care system than to find a kin. And I really want to pause here. I'm not criticizing local social services. Their hands are tied. Their caseloads are way too big. And that was another one of the findings. The caseloads are just entirely too big to be effective at this work. Finally, they noted that reunification of biological families is often a solution that's overlooked by social services, and we need to rethink pulling a child out. There are times when they have to be pulled out. Every child in this video needed to be removed from their family. But when there are times when the parent coaching or anger management or something can help, that should be explored. And finally, they said that the whole structure of the social services system is flawed because Virginia tells the localities what to do in terms of regulatory requirements, but it doesn't have the authority to enforce those regulations. Every locality owns their children. The kids in Richmond Social Services are in the custody of Richmond Social Services. The kids in Chesterfield are in Chesterfield's custody. The kids in Hanover, Henrico. And so each locality has its own rules, its own philosophy, its own procedures. They don't work across boundaries. And the state may come in and say, hey, you really shouldn't do what you're doing, but it has no authority to enforce that. And that's a big challenge. It's really a structural challenge because of the type of constitution we have. And yet, who's losing? Kids. And so J. Lark noted that we need to change the structure and have localities be more responsible to the state. That we need to change the caseloads, reduce the caseloads, and allow social workers to do their great work and to really work with families and support them. That we need to work more with biological families and look for kin before we put a child with a stranger in a different county, separated from their siblings. So many of the children we have are separated from their siblings because foster families won't take multiples. And we need to stop that so that we have better outcomes. And we need to give some technical assistance to localities on how to use best practices. As a private nonprofit, that's all we use now. Best practices, research-based approaches, but the localities just don't have the push and the resources to always do that, and so then you have bad outcomes for children. The bottom line is, Virginia needs to take action, and we need to take action right now, and it requires resources, but either you can proactively invest in our system, or we all pay later on. Or we're paying for the cost of the negative things that happen. I'm willing to wager that each one of you would share Children's Home Society's philosophy that a family is where you get love, where you get support, where you get the confidence to believe in yourself, where you find the morals and values that really help make you a good citizen. And that's what our agency strives to do every day, to make sure children have family through adoption. We've been licensed since 1900. And so Mickey and I are two of the oldies, but not the oldest, who've been touched by Children's Home Society. In that time, we have found families for more than 14,000 children. It's enough kids to fill the diamond. And that's a ripple effect throughout this entire community. And as an adoptive parent, I can tell you, it's not easy. It's not perfect and Disney-like, but it's real, and it's love, and it's forever. And that's what children need most of all. As you saw in the video, the stories of the children that we're placing are compelling. But, as I've shared, the outcomes can be amazing. Every one of those kids now has a family to call their own. The young lady who was narrating was adopted by a single mom, and she was a challenge. She really pressed back. Then the single mom agreed to adopt again, so she adopted two of her younger siblings, and then brought in an older sibling who was over 18 but just needed a mom. So she has 4 girls now. I tell you, as a parent of 2 teenagers, I'm like, whoo, you've earned your halo. But isn't that beautiful? Because you're keeping the siblings together, and that gives them a pace to be grounded and hope for the future. Not only do we work with teens, but all of the youth in our program are considered the most difficult to place. We go to social service agencies and say, give us the toughest to place. We recruit families, we train families, we do home studies. We make it easy, and we don't charge minimal fees, very little fees, because we don't want resources to be an obstacle to creating a family for these children. What has grown in the field, which the state is just starting to figure out now, is what we call post-adoption services. Because when you place a child who's been hurt and abused like these kids have, the challenges don't go away once they have a family. There's an ongoing need for support. We coach the parents. We provide a respite for the families. And we provide what we call Kids Club, which is just a time for adoptive children to come together, to have some fun, but to learn they're not the only ones. They don't look like their families or are separated from siblings, and that there's a commonality and a bond that's created. And our post-adoption services are flourishing as more and more families take on these challenging cases, but we need the adoptions to thrive. We need them to thrive so the children can heal and move on from their past, and so the families can stay intact. And finally, one of our responses, which we're encouraging the state to do, is what we call the Possibilites Project. We recognize since Virginia's 49th, and many children don't get adopted, we created a program so when a child isn't adopted and they've aged out, they can come into our program. We can provide housing for free, as well as job training, career development, life skills, coaching, access to health care. We give them a social worker who helps them say, what are your dreams? What do you want to be? And then they map out a plan so that they can get there. Instead of it being social services saying, you need to work at McDonald's, and there's nothing wrong with working at McDonald's, but instead of telling them what they need to do, we ask them what they want to do, and they are engaged in the process of getting to be a successful adult. They're required to do community service. And we're asking them to be voices down at the General Assembly to tell their story. We've enjoyed amazing success at this research-based process. Again, what we need to do is provide a continuum of supports so that we capture these children, get them with families as soon as we can, keep them with their kin, make sure the adoptions are supported, and we're there in case they aren't adopted. These are models and lessons for the state. Think holistically, think big picture, step back and look at collaborative opportunities with the nonprofit sector. Look to philanthropy to fill the gaps. If we don't invest in these children, we all pay. And the final component, and this is a way where you can be a real help, is advocacy. Lots of folks don't know that there are children in the foster care system that never get adopted. This isn't a top of mind issue like homelessness or cancer research, and those are all important, critical things that the community needs to invest in. But when you say, you know, Virginia's 49th of the 50 states of kids aging out, people kind of glaze over. And so the first step is what you're doing, is learning more, learning the facts, and then helping us be a voice. We're educating our legislators about the challenges and telling them to think about solutions. We're not trying to penalize. The past is the past. Virginia sucks, right? But we can do better. And we don't say it quite like that, I have to say. I was nervous about being on camera. I said, I want to tell them our comments. Virginia can do better. And there are ways to do it. Hey, when you're 49, we can learn from some other states, right? And in fact, we commissioned a nationwide survey. We got a grant to find out what are all the other states in the nation doing to fix this challenge. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We got a major study done by Child Trends. So when we did it, they said, well, when we do this survey, you know, folks don't like to fill out surveys. You'll probably get a 40% response rate. We got a 92% response rate because other states are battling with this. And if the camera weren't on, I'd say we took it down to social services, and they said, oh, that's nice, and they set it aside. But now JLARC has come in and said, hey, you need to fix this, and we're hopeful that this is not a time to penalize the state, but to recognize if we think strategically, if we think creatively, if we think partnership, our whole Commonwealth wins. And most importantly, the kids win. I've seen this video so many times, and every time I see it, I feel full. Because I know that's just the tip of the iceberg. And the hardest part of my work, and I've been connected, as Mickey said, to Children's Home Society since the 1990s. I don't want to give my age away. I remember sitting on that sofa and waiting to meet my babies for the first time. But the hardest part of this work has been hearing the horrific things that can happen to children. Every time I think I'm surprised, it gets worse. And yet the best part is seeing the families who come forward to say, we're going to help you heal. We're going to make it okay, and it's not going to be fast, and it's going to take a lot, but we're going to be there for you through thick and thin. And so instead of couples with empty car seats waiting to meet a baby, like I did, now I see these teenagers sitting on the sofa looking angry and looking doubtful and thinking, oh, another social worker. But I know in the other room is a family that we've trained, and we're going to support, and they're going to be there so that the children who come in and they can't even look you in the eye, a year later, they're physically transforming. Their skin clears up, they grow, they gain weight, and they can look you in the eye and shake your hand. And that's a powerful thing. So you're knowing about this, telling your friends about this, giving us an opportunity to tell this tough but powerful story is a long way towards making a difference. Children can heal. Children are resilient. These are kids we took into our care, and this is the least that we can do for them. So acknowledging the JLARC study is the first step. On was it Thursday, Mickey, we were trying to connect, and I shared I was going down to the General Assembly to testify before a budget hearing, to ask the General Assembly to please fund an investment in the foster care system. It was a Health and Human Services Committee. Probably 130 plus people were down there to testify, and there were very compelling people testifying. Only 3 folks came to talk about foster care. That was really telling to me, and they all happen to be from Children's Home Society. This isn't something that's at the top of mind, but with the JLARC study, and with folks like you calling into your legislators and saying, we can do better, I tell you, we really can do better, and we see that work each and every day. I'd like to open up to questions. I just totally got off, I don't even know what page I was on. I just started talking. So I hope I said everything I was supposed to say. I get so fired up about this because I see it. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to tell this story. I encourage you, what questions do you have? Because that's the way to learn. And thanks again for this opportunity to share. So I'll start with some questions. And then I have a video, I have to say, that's just 5 minutes, but it's some of the folks who adopted, so we'll end with that, because after that heavy one, you need to see just a few of the stories of the folks who adopted. But let's some questions.
What state of the nation is #1 that leads the list, quote, doing the best job, and what challenges do they not face?
So it varies. Sometimes it's Utah, sometimes it's Nevada. It just keeps changing. The common denominator is a receptivity to recognize and keep the kids out of foster care in the first place, which seems counterintuitive. Getting them in there with their kin, getting them back with their biological family, having policies that support alternatives to the foster care system. So it varies from year to year, but when we did the child trend study to look at what all the other 50 states, this is where I gotta be careful on this tape, it said we thought there'd be some magical policy, right? Virginia doesn't do X, Y, Z. No, we have most of the policies. What we're not doing well is enforcing it and funding them. And so we could really fix that. It's a change in mindset. And that's tougher to bring on than adopting a new law or policy, but we can do it.
Does enforcement require more funding?
And it requires more funding, and that's right. And everyone goes down to the General Assembly saying we need more funding. But I'm not a social worker. I want to say the recommended caseload is maybe 20 cases. Virginia social workers have on average twice that. So when you have 40 to 45 cases of abuse and neglect, and you have to check in with every child once a month, right? It just doesn't happen. You can't fix anything because you're just putting out the fires. So yes, we need more social workers, and it's a great opportunity to invest, but again, you pay now or you pay later. There's some the data in terms of how we're falling short on funding is abysmal. And we need to be more strategic, and I would argue get philanthropy involved. Yes, yes.
Does the child have a say in their adoption?
They really do. That's a big part. So great question. When a family comes in and says we'd like to adopt, we begin counseling and just exploring with the family before we present any child to them what their capacity is, what's going to work within their family, how will their extended family respond. At the same time, we're working with the children to find who do you need in your life. What is the family with whom you would best fit? There are some young ladies, for example, we're just really afraid of being in families with men, right? And so we work with that. And so we identify the needs of the children. It's called child-specific recruitment. We find out what the children need, we identify what the parents have, and that's how we make a match. We're not in the business of finding kids for families. We find families for the children. And getting that child voice is pretty powerful. We had a board member who served with me for a while who came to Children's Home Society and said, we'd like to adopt a baby. After working with the family, they decided maybe they could adopt an older child. So they came in to adopt a young man who was about 9 at the time. It went so well, they ended up saying, we can do it again, we'll adopt a girl. Well, when they got this study of the young lady, they noticed at the very end it mentioned another sibling. She had 3 siblings, but she had pulled herself out so that they could get adopted. And she felt, because I'm older, they won't adopt me. That's how, by getting the voice of the children, we made sure that those kids could stay together and be part of the family. So we always work with the children to find out what their needs are, and then find the families that can meet those needs. Yes.
Do these children really know what they want at that age?
Oh, that's a great question. So they don't all know. Okay, very candidly, we want to hear them. We want them to understand that their voice can be heard, but often the best way to describe it is we have a video of a little guy and we're talking to him. We get videotapes of the kids, and if you go to our website, you can see video vignettes so that we can humanize the children. And so we say, you know, what's your favorite color? What do you want? What school do you like to go to? when was the moment you were most proud? And without hesitation, he said, when I told my mommy to stop hitting us, right? But about 5 minutes later in the video, I said, what would you like for Christmas? And he said, without hesitation, my mommy back. That's all he knows. And so what we do is allow the children to have a voice, but ultimately it's the judgment of our social work team. But at least they feel like they've had a say. And we honor that, and there may be kin, if it's safe and appropriate, that we can still keep a connection. But it's always what's in the best interest of the child. But at least they feel like they're heard. Now for the older kids, their voice really matters, right? And many of our kids don't want to be adopted. Family is where they were hurt. Family is the very people who let them down most. And so there's a lot of counseling and therapeutic work that goes into just making them feel safe before we even start that process.
You mentioned that that kin do not get reimbursed. I was wondering where Virginia ranks for foster care families as far as reimbursement goes.
We're in the middle. We're still not where we need to be. And I'll pause. There was legislation passed last year that let a very narrow, I want to say a couple of hundred kin of the thousands of kin available get reimbursed for bringing in relatives. But our reimbursement rates could improve. And I think that's where Virginia has to make some tough choices. Do you reimburse the families for taking on this tremendous challenge, or do you invest in more social workers to find, there's a real balance there. And social services has done a study of what they think it would cost, and it's pretty sizable to fix the whole problem. I think we need to do it in little bites and pieces. And the JLARC study, I'm hoping will be the initiative, but again, candidly, the fact that only 3 people were down at that budget hearing the other day was discouraging to us. And yet what it said, we need to continue to do advocacy, because as an agency, we hadn't done that before. We were so frustrated that we were replacing kids and working hard, and yet Virginia stayed at the bottom. We thought we need to fix this at a systemic level and attack it from both ends. Some questions?
I was saddened and surprised that the foster system had so many children that were abused while they were in foster care. And I was wondering, is the vetting process for foster parents different from adoption, or is it?
Well, certainly if you're an adoptive parent, the vetting process is very thorough because it's meant to be a lifelong connection. What I don't want to suggest is that foster parents aren't fully vetted. It's just that you're going to have the people who slip through the cracks, and it's a small percentage, but it's a tragic percentage, because here are children who were removed from abuse and neglect and then placed in another. So it doesn't happen often, but it can happen, and constant training for the foster parents is part of the solution. The reality is, and it's a sad reality, these kids do act out. They are very challenging, and so we need to make sure that the foster parents and the adoptive parents are constantly trained. We have a young man who's a teenager, and when he's really upset, and he's on the autism spectrum, his way of expressing his dismay is to disrobe. It could be at Walmart, it could be at Target, it could be anywhere because that's his way, and it has to do with the type of abuse that he experienced. And so what we had to do was train the family to always carry a robe. Mom keeps a big purse, and when James decides to disrobe, she covers him up with a robe, and then they take him out to de-escalate. I say that to say the challenges that the families are taking on are significant. That's not an excuse for abuse, but what it goes to is a need for ongoing training and supports for the foster families, and to get those kids out of foster care and with a permanent family who's going to be committed to be there for them.
Is there anything specific that we can call our legislators about? Is there anything coming up before the DA this term? Or if we call our legislators, what should we say?
I'm going to pause. So the JLARC study came out right at the end of December, and so social services is at this very moment coming up with a platform of how they would like to respond. I called our advocacy because we have a full-time person down at the General Assembly for the first time this session, which starts tomorrow. She's working. As soon as we find out what that proposal looks like, we would be happy to broadcast out and share that in any way possible. What I would say right now is we would encourage our legislators to support initiatives that allow the state foster care system to respond to the JLARC recommendations. I'm sure that social services will come out with a plan. And there's a piecemeal way or a holistic way, and I don't know what that is. We can talk about the need for more caseworkers. We can talk about the need to change the way the localities don't really have to respond or do what the state says. So there are a number of fixes, and they're working to come up with that big platform. I was really hoping they'd have it by today, because I was expecting that question. But always saying support investments in our foster care system, support permanency, And I'm hoping a budget amendment will come through that says, and this is what the first phase will bring.
How much of your funding comes from the government and how much from private or corporate donations?
So for Children's Home Society, right now about 20%.
From?
About 20% of our overall funding comes from the state. The rest is what we're raising. That program that we provide for youth who've aged out, and we're providing free housing, job training, mentors, community service, that's all privately funded.
Do you have a large marketing budget? I mean,
And so what
we don't hear much about you.
we, as much as we can, our budget's about $1.8 million, and all of our social workers are licensed clinical social workers or master's degree social workers who are trauma certified. So we really invest in our programming because that's how we can make an impact, but we're working to get public relations whenever we can. There was a story right before Christmas about a donor who donated computers to the kids in that program. So we're looking for free media. We're using our website as a driver. It's a tough choice that nonprofits have to make. Invest in programming or promoting yourself. And that's why things like this are so important, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about our work. And our disruption rate, or the number of kids whose adoptions don't work, is like 2%. Our team does an outstanding job of making sure the adoptions stick. But this is our way of letting folks know it's critical. And again, we don't want to charge big fees because then families can't afford to adopt. I'd say about 50% of our adoptive parents are single folks now. We haven't met Mr. Right or Miss Right, but we have a capacity to love. We have a commitment to young people. We have a spare room. And they can't pay big fees. They're making a lifetime commitment to the youth. And so we really work to raise revenue to make that happen. And what we're hoping is that the state will follow our model, because our work with the youth who age out, our outcomes are 10 times, I mean really, like 100% of our kids are employed, 100% of our kids are still in school, 80% of our young people are getting health care. We are seeing such great outcomes that we're going to the state to say, here's the research, and here's what our outcomes are, would you invest in us? But it's not that easy. So we get private funding, we don't want them to fall through the cracks. Yes.
You say you charge parents?
They're minimal fees. What we found is that so many folks come in and are interested, but then after the training, and it's a pretty candid training, right? We're brutal, we're forthcoming, we're saying, here are the challenges. Many of them said, well, after we got the training, we just decided we don't want to do it, and that's okay. So what we do charge is a fee for the home study time, because there's a certain amount of time that the social workers are committing to complete and do the home studies, but the rest we provide the post-adoption services at no charge, we provide trainings at no charge, we provide weeks of training before their study. So we keep our fees to a minimum, but we need to see the families have a little skin in the game in order to make it a good win-win. Yes, here, and then we'll come back over here.
What is the youngest age that you place of a child in a foster home?
So, interesting. The little ones, the babies, and I'd say under the age of 5, generally go right to a pre-adoptive family. We have foster families who are interested in adoption, and so often when they're younger, they really go straight to, they don't go into foster care. They go with the family and says, we'll foster, but the plan is to adopt. So what we're really most proud of are the older kids. And we have literally placed children a week away from being 18. The average age of the children we serve is 14 and a half. We're placing the older kids, and those are the ones that are the most difficult to place. We're placing the sibling groups and the kids with a significant history. So the younger kids, I'm sure babies, we still do infant adoptions, but they're far and few between. The real need are the older children.
Do they live at the children's home between when they're, and how do they get there? Can they send them?
Great question. So all of the children that we place through these programs are in the custody of social services. They are literally living in foster families. Many have been there 4 or 5 years. What we do is we go to the social services and say, hey, they need to get out of foster care. So we'd love to find an adoptive family for them. And the first place we go is, hey, adoptive family, they've been here 5 years. What do you think? Are you prepared to commit for a lifetime? And if they aren't, we respect that, and then we go out and recruit a family. So none of the kids are actually in our office. Our office is really a base from which we do our administrative work and our research and all that, our trainings. The kids are in foster care, and we go out and find the families, make the connections, and support the families. We do a small number of infant adoptions, but they go right to the families that are going to adopt as well. People call us all the time and say, we'd love to come rock the babies. I'm thinking, I would too. But we're really rocking 16-year-olds. So although, you know what? Some of these 16-year-olds have never had love. We've had 17-year-olds who never had a birthday party, right? In their whole entire life. The kids that are in that program who've aged out and they're 18, 19, 20 years old, when we said the first Christmas, what would you like for Christmas? They literally were like, no one's ever asked us that before. We don't even know what to do with that. So maybe we can't rock the teenagers, but there are other ways we can show them love, and everyone needs love.
But they're not in your...
But they're not, we don't have physical custody, right? They're in foster families and we're trying to get them out. So
You were talking about training. Is there training, obviously for the adoptive parents, is there training for the siblings?
So yes, great question. So when you bring a child into your home, it has to be a good fit for everyone, not just for the parents. There are things like there are kids who've always been the oldest, and now suddenly maybe you're bringing in a child who's older, and then the priority or the leadership roles change in the family. So yes, we home study all of the children. We're required at 14 to do background checks and all of the other things that happen on a child, but we make sure that this is a good fit for the family. We do a thorough vetting because we want these adoptions to last, and so we include the children in appropriate training, and we include the whole family in the approval process, and we include the grandparents and the aunt. It's great if a couple wants to adopt, but their parents are like, yeah, they don't look like you, or what's going on. You just have to make sure that that whole village is prepared to meet the child's needs, and that's why this is labor-intensive, hours and hours of work, because it's not easy, but the alternative is a lot less easy.
Does the child that is to be adopted, does he or she have the opportunity to know that it's not working out for him or her to come back to whoever and say, I'm sorry, this is...
We have to honor where the children are. We're required after the placement is made to meet with the family at least 6 months, sometimes a year, every month, or as needed, to make sure that the bonding is taking place, that the appropriate attachments are taking place, that this is working for the child and the family. Again, once you get to the point you've been adopted and then it falls apart, that's really not good. And so yes, we are always seeking feedback from the child, and again, providing the therapy. We work with therapists because kids are afraid of their families. We had one little guy who would do great all day, but every night at bedtime he would have these horrific head-banging nightmares, right? And finally, the adoptive mom kept calling us, and we were coaching her. And finally, we just said, you have to ask them what's wrong. And she said, what's wrong? I'm just trying to read you a story. And his response without pause was, what do I have to do for you if they'll let you read me this story? Right? This is where they are. But that was a healing moment, because then it allowed the family to come back to us and us to give them guidance. So it's an ongoing process. It's a tough process, and yet the outcomes are great when it works, and it works. So we're about, I guess, do you have time for one more question, or no? I'm getting
Yes.
I can talk about this all day, guys, so I just throw a shoe at me. I told me, throw a knife at me if I keep going, because I'll just keep going.
Last question.
One last question, yes. And I'll be happy to answer questions afterwards.
Is there any interface between the Children's Home Society and group homes?
Yes, we're going to group homes now and saying, hey, group home, congregate care is not the answer. They need to be with families. And so we are placing young people out of group homes, which are for kids whose behaviors are much more challenging, but often those behaviors are challenging is because they're seeking attention and they need therapeutic supports. We give them therapeutic supports, and we are placing kids who are living in group homes or residential treatment facilities. It's pretty great stuff.
So you are the liaison between foster residency and adoption.
And adoption. And we do whatever it takes to make it match and then to make it last. That's a great summary. That's it in a nutshell. And Virginia can do better, and folks like you knowing about this are what are the first start. I'll just save my next video for the next time I come back. I'm sorry, I could just talk about it all day. Thank you again for your interest. Great
Thank you, Nadine. I think we all learned a lot, and I understand if people need to get up and leave the room, so you may do so. I just wanted to share with you something that was shared with me. Nadine asked that her honorarium be donated to the Children's Home Society in honor of Mickey Stout. I thought that was sweet, and I wanted to share that with you all. Thank you quickly to Mary Martha's. And if anybody wants to buy flowers from the table, you can get your money, $5 to Blair. As you leave today, keep in your prayers, please, Stacy Hill, Dorothy Kufler, Carla Matthews, and Betty Stallard. We rejoice for our church as we celebrate the call of our next pastor and head of staff, Amy Starr Redwine. If you all don't have a brochure, Terry was going to put some in here or out in the hall. I think they must be out in the hall, so if you want to see me, I'll make sure you get your hands on that if you haven't seen it. We grieve with Julie McGrath, whose husband died on December 15th, and the family of Phoebe Hall, who died on January 4th. Please remember our military heroes, Edward Allen, Jenny Stigl Burkett, Matthew Horton, Mason Loudon, Nathan Thomas Mead, and Connor Partlow. Our next program is on February 5th, and I wish you a happy new year and hope to see you then.
Melissa, could you show the video? Please stand up there for those who want to
Sure, sure. The video will play.
Okay.
All right.
If the technology allows.
It will play if we can make it play.
Thank you. Be right back.
I didn't know it was like, I just in my leg,
For almost 120 years, Children's Home Society of Virginia has been inspired by the power of family. From our founding in 1900 through today, we've helped place over 13,500 children in safe, loving, permanent homes. We know that family is needed now more than ever. The power of family transforms lives. Not just the lives of children, but the lives of all who form the permanent bonds of love, attachment, and trust. Our journey is the journey of our families, those of 50 years ago to those of today. It is a journey filled with hope, not without hardship, but forged from bonds that go beyond blood. It is a journey of family.
Family is, when you're an adoptive family, it's building that family and creating it. When Josh came, I was getting to know him, know about him, and I would always tease him that I don't know how his birth mother gave birth to him because he's totally mine. I just think that learning that stuff about each other made us family, being vulnerable and trusting each other. So family is something that you create, especially when you're looking at adoption.
Family to me is a place of mind more than a place in general, because without family you wouldn't be able to wake up in the morning and think, hey, I'm going to be loved today, or I'm going to be cared for today. And with my family, I'm loved and cared for every single day. So it's like, when I think about family, I think about it's just a place where my heart belongs, a place where my mind's supposed to be.
Family makes me feel complete. Before we had Tanya in our lives, we did a lot of fun things, we went out, but we also were missing a lot of culture and other experiences, jokes, Hamilton songs being sung at the top of lungs, and other experiences just bring a much more rich experience to our lives.
Family makes me feel whole. Before Tanya, Ross and I had a ton of fun. We enjoyed, hanging out and doing things, but we definitely didn't do as much as we do now. I don't get laughed at as much as I do now for falling off of hammocks, and she doesn't let me live it down. I think I'll be 50 and I'll still get laughed at for that one, but family definitely makes me feel whole.
Family makes me feel good, like myself, because you can just be who you are.
Because family is very important, and to me, family means it's the ones who you love, who you care for, you're close to them and they're close to you.
Family means to me
someone who's going to give me hugs when I'm down, someone who loves me and calls me mommies, not necessarily the person who naturally birthed you, but someone that God chose for me, and that's what family means to me.
Family means to me, well, to put it shortly, it's the people that you make memories with, the people that are always around you, that you make close bonds and connections with, and that could be many different people. This inner circle right here is my family.
He loves us.
It means someone who's always going to be there for you, and even when you're sad or depressed.
The word adoption takes their breath away. It gave us 2 wonderful sons, and now we have 2 equally wonderful grandchildren. That is really what family means to us.
I came from a family of 4, and I can't imagine Anne and I going through the rest of our lives without a family. And so we turned to adoption, which has been the most wonderful experience of our lives.
I think every successful family is built on love, trust, and respect, don't you?
It's the 3 legs of a stool.
That's right.
And each is as important as the other. And that's what makes a family.
And you hope that that one family will pass it on to future families.
Absolutely.
That it's their legacy to be pushed forward in the future.
To me, Children's Home Society means family. It's the family that we're able to create through our services every day. It's the love and the hope and the comfort and the laughter that comes from being connected to someone forever. Family means that you have a parent or parents and a child that are working together as a team so that that child has a brighter future. Family means the extended family, outside of just the families that create, but the donors, both individual and foundations, the board leadership, the community volunteers who really help come together and allow us to do the work that we do to create forever families. Family means that our community is in a stronger place because a healthy community starts with a healthy foundation of families. And that's what Children's Home Society is all about. I have a few extras, so if anyone please feel free to take one. And each one is a month of a story about a family that's been created. So I'll just have these right up here. Thank you again.